Caller with the last three digits, 577. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Chris Daly, CHRISDALY, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 100 years. NSEA strongly opposes SB4. This past weekend, dozens of educators wearing red face coverings joined with other workers in front of the legislature to protect Nevada workers. We called attention to a dangerous plan to shield employers from COVID-related liability, which would be a strong disincentive for employers to ensure workplace safety. We chanted, "Kill the bill, not the workers." In the 31st special session, thousands of educators from across the state asked the legislature to fund healthy schools. Instead, we ended up with a net loss of over $100 million to K-12 education. Now in the 32nd special session, thousands of educators from across the state again have asked you to reject limiting COVID-related liability for Nevada employers, including school districts. Cutting funding and cutting corners while safely reopening schools is just not possible. Placing limits on liability sends the absolute wrong message to school districts who are now walking away from good faith negotiations over worker and student safety. In this way, SB4 is already putting our educators, students, and community more at risk. The science and data on COVID-19 transmission among children is still emerging. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control released a study on the transmission and infection among attendees of a camp in Georgia that suffered a COVID-19 outbreak. All attendees of the camp provided a negative COVID-19 test before attending. Within 14 days, 51% 6 to 10-year-olds and 44% of 11 to 17-year-olds tested positive for COVID-19. The study's authors found that COVID-19 spread efficiently in this camp setting, quote, resulting in high attack rates among persons in all age groups, despite efforts by camp officials to implement most recommended strategies to prevent transmission, end quote. Those measures were similar to the ones recommended here for Nevada school districts. While it is encouraging that kids don't get sick and die in the same numbers as adults from COVID-19, evidence is mounting that they can be significant vectors.
You could go ahead and wrap up. You're at the 2 minutes.
Thousands of educators and families prepare to go back to school, we believe essential school supplies should mean pencils and paper or Chromebooks and Wi-Fi, not wheels and trucks. Please protect educators, students, and Nevada workers. Kill Senate Bill 4, not the workers.
Hi, good morning. Alex Marks with NSEA, ALEX, MARKS. For the last week, we've said back to school is no fairy tale because this bill is a poison apple being served to teachers, education support professionals, and others. This afternoon, we heard nothing but rebuttals and rebukes from members of this body to Trump's irresponsible comments. However, by this evening and this morning, you're running Mitch McConnell-type legislation, the same type of legislation that's holding up the HEROES Act at the federal level. It's unfortunate that after 1,500 plus emails that were sent to you all on this issue, we were essentially ignored but for a couple of questions. Educators are perplexed that such a provision is being considered by a Democratic trifecta. We have a workers' protection bill that provides near immunity for businesses and school districts. Oddly enough, this bill is being heard the same day that the Washoe Education Association filed an OSHA complaint requesting investigation of the Washoe County School District for unsafe work conditions. We cannot put economic recovery over public health and safety. Today, we heard Governor Sisolak say he spoke to business executives about this issue, but he's never spoken to a teacher or an ESP about it. Whether it's the 31st session budget cuts or the disaster that was SB 543 from last regular session, too often decisions that you all make negatively impact the work of educators and the education of our students. Simply, we sometimes just deal with it, but this time your decisions are a matter of safety, health, and possibly life and death. The language would limit COVID-19 work claims and provide school districts with near immunity so broad that not even egregious behavior would be actionable. Educators are scared. In the 31st special session, you took away K-12 funding, and in the 32nd, you're taking away their right to sue. Back to school supplies once meant pencils, erasers, notebooks, and now they mean wills and trusts. This is what our people are thinking about heading back to school. We understand there's no perfect solution to many of the issues we face, but we also recognize the importance for Nevadans to return safely to our classrooms, to our cafeterias, and our bus yards. We do not believe that the risk of doing so should be borne exclusively by teachers, education support professionals, and others. This provision is rotten. This provision should be removed.
You could please go ahead and wrap up.
There's a line in the sand. I'm proud to stand on the side of workers and our educators, and we hope you join us. There's plenty of room. Thank you.
My name is Selena LaRue, SELENA, LA space RUE. I'm calling as a teacher, a parent, and a member of NSCA and WEA, and I am in complete opposition to SB4. Education just cannot seem to catch a break with this legislature. First, you force devastating cuts on our schools in the midst of a pandemic. Then, instead of focusing on how to keep our schools safe, you jam through legislation that will protect negligent school districts and embolden them to cut corners as we bring 460,000 students back into our schools. If this bill passes, educators and parents across the state will know more clearly than ever that our elected officials care more about their corporate donors than the people sacrificing everything to educate the next generation of Nevadans. You may be hoping the cover of night will hide your cowardly actions, but we see you, and we won't forget. Educators across this state are being forced against their will into unsafe working environments. This week, instead of planning my get-to-know-you activities and prepping my room for a new batch of kiddos, I had to sit down with a lawyer and draft my will. My will. Because I do not trust that my district is going to keep me safe in my classroom. My 3-year-old daughter may be deprived of a parent because of a thoughtless vote by an ill-informed school board. Sadly, instead of encouraging our school boards to be more careful in their pandemic planning or setting in place legal protocols for ensuring safety in our schools, this bill issues a blank check to districts to get kids back into unsafe classrooms regardless of the consequences. I also find it reprehensible that much-needed worker protections have been added to this rotten bill rather than presented in a separate bill as they deserve. This attempt to sweeten the deal is disingenuous and an insult to all thinking Nevadans. We will not be fooled into relinquishing our rights in order to establish common sense protections, which should already have been in place before reopening. I urge you to reject this bill and stop the subterfuge. Present 2 separate bills on liability and workers' protections and vote with honesty and courage on each.
Please go ahead and wrap up.
I don't know what happens to a moral compass once you cross the threshold of the Nevada legislature. Perhaps, like all concept of time, it vanishes beneath the deal-making and back-channeling. But my moral compass is clear. Sacrificing the lives of educators and workers to protect the profits of negligent employers is wrong on a fundamental level. Find your moral compass, do the right thing, protect our workers.
Good morning, Madam Chair and esteemed members. This is Carmen Andrews, CarmenAndrews. I am the Vice President of NEA of Southern Nevada and a high school Spanish teacher in the CCSD. I am speaking against SB4. What this bill says to educators is that we know sending you back to work is dangerous enough that some of you might die. But if you do, we're going to make sure that your employer can't be held responsible. It is unconscionable to have a bill to protect culinary workers and in the same bill limit liability for school districts and others. What educators should be doing right now is preparing to give our students the best possible education in the middle of a pandemic. What educators are doing instead is preparing wills and trusts. My colleagues and I deserve strong district eventual reopening plans that don't allow for immunity and shortcuts. You can't cut funding, cut corners, and at the same time safely reopen. I support the need to protect our brothers and sisters in the culinary union, but unfortunately, this isn't the bill. I am not expendable. My colleagues are not expendable. Educators are not expendable. Please vote no on SB4.